I recently dealt with something no soldier should ever come home to. My house was taken, leased out by the HOA, while I was still overseas, all because I left to serve my country. They claimed I abandoned the property. Funny thing is, their biggest mistake was thinking I'd come back quietly. Let me start from the beginning. I didn't even make it to the porch before I knew something was wrong. The grass was cut. That doesn't sound like a big deal unless you left for a combat zone, with weeds knee-high and a busted sprinkler that chirped like a dying bird every third cycle. But now the hedges were trimmed, the sidewalk pressure-washed. The whole place looked like it had just been listed on Zillow. There was even a welcome mat, a new one, live, laugh, love. I stopped walking that mat wasn't ours. Ours said, come back with a warrant. A cold pulse moved through my chest, not panic, just data sensory input. Something had been changed without permission, without warning. Like finding your toothbrush moved half an inch to the left, except this time it was your entire house. Then I saw it, a red Tesla in the driveway parked confidently, like it belonged there, like it had always been there. Like the person driving it didn't just move in, they felt invited. That's when I heard the wind chimes. My wife hated wind chimes, so I walked up, quiet, measured. I reached for the doorbell and froze through the side window. I could see movement, someone walking past the hall, barefoot t-shirt, holding something, maybe a smoothie. Then the music kicked in. Jazz, not the real kind. The playlist kind background noise for someone drinking cold brew and updating a travel blog. The door opened before I could even knock. He was in his early 30s, flip-flops, aviators resting on his head, holding a banana-strawberry protein blend in a reusable glass. Looked like someone who said namaste before arguing with baristas. Can I help you? He asked casually, like I was the mailman or a lost tourist. I stared at him. Not because I was confused. Was he because I was calculating I'd been dropped into firefights with less warning than this? This is my house, I said slowly. He tilted his head like a golden retriever. I don't think so, man. My hand went to my keyring. I pulled out the house key, the one I'd carried through 2 continents, 7 airports, and 1 IED blast. I slipped it in the lock. It didn't turn, dude, he said, stepping slightly back. If you're looking for the leasing office or whatever, you might want to call the HOA. We signed everything through them, named Zach, by the way. Zach, I almost laughed. That's when the black SUV rolled up. No sirens, no lights. Just silent and smug, glossy letters across the side community safety enforcement. 2 guys stepped out in matching uniforms, khakis, navy polos, tactical vests that probably hadn't seen action beyond a spill in the clubhouse kitchen. Sir, one said, approaching me with fake authority, we're going to need you to step away from the residence. This is my house, I repeated, more force this time. They didn't blink. The tenants have signed paperwork, the second said. This is now an HOA-managed lease. Hold you are trespassing. Where's Karen? I asked. They looked at each other, and like she'd been summoned by the audacity of her own name, she appeared clipboard beige visor sunglasses that could reflect regret if she ever felt any. Oh, she said, smiling like she'd been rehearsing it. You're early. Excuse me, you weren't scheduled to return until Q4. That's what your wife's last message said. I wasn't scheduled like a quarterly report. I was deployed. Karen didn't miss a beat, and we thank you for your service, but under bylaw, 14C homes left unoccupied for over 90 days without documented maintenance or direct contact are subject to board reassignment. Reassignment, I asked. She nodded towards Zach, still sipping his smoothie, behind the safety of my foyer. We placed a tenant temporarily just to ensure the property remained in circulation. You mean you rented out my home? We protected the community. It's not personal. Did you receive my deployment waiver? I asked. She hesitated, just a twitch. Then the smile returned. Must have been a clerical error, regardless. You'll have a chance to contest the board's actions at the next monthly meeting. Let me get this straight. I said, voice low. You changed my locks, leased my house, and filled it with strangers, all while I was in another country serving this one. She shrugged. We followed procedure. You didn't follow the law, then I'm sure you'll have no trouble proving that, but until then. She glanced at the guards. Please leave the property. They stepped closer. Not aggressive, just enough pressure to see what I'd do. I looked past them through the open door. I saw my wife's framed deployment photo still hanging near the kitchen. They hadn't even taken it down. Zach raised his smoothie and waved. That's when I felt it. The key in my palm digging into my skin. My hand clenched. I could have snapped it in two instead. I dropped it. Backley, stand down, because I hadn't coffee. My wife asked softly. I nodded. The kids were still asleep. At least I hoped they were. Our son had barely spoken since we got booted off our own sidewalk, his hoodie into my pocket turned, slowly. Walked to the curb, sat in my rental car. Eyes forward, not defeated, calculating. I pulled out my phone. No lawyer. Not yet. I scrolled until I found a number I hadn't used since the last time someone tried to make me feel powerless. Texted one word ready. The response came in 2 seconds flat. Always. I wasn't calling for help. I was calling for backup. The smell of motel carpet. Never really leaves you. It's like sadness soaked into polyester and it clings. That's what I noticed first when I woke up the next morning. That and the fact that my boots were still at the foot of the bed, lined up like I was waiting for the next mission brief, like I couldn't phew, was his armour. Now he sat with it up, like he was under siege. And honestly, he wasn't wrong while they rested. I worked the laptop, open eyes, bloodshot pages of HOA bylaws, zoning codes, and board meeting notes flying across the screen. And then I found it buried in a draft update revision. D Community Vitality Addendum Bylaw 14C. Section 3 properties deemed non-contributive to visual or environmental health standards for a period exceeding 90 days may be reassigned to provisional board control, pending occupancy legalese. But it translated to, if we don't like how your yard looks and you're not here to stop us, we take your house. And here's the kicker. The bylaw backdated filed after I'd left approved during what they called an emergency proxy quorum. No public notice, no door-to-door, no transparency. It was signed by Karen, of course it was. I scrolled through the meeting minutes, found a line in her handwriting. This should help solve the Spruce Lane issue. That was me. I wasn't a person to her, I was an issue. I closed the laptop, walked outside to get some air, tried to feel normal, didn't work. And then, from across the parking lot, I saw it. One of the fake HOA guards, the younger one from yesterday, standing next to a pickup, laughing on the phone. I moved closer, quiet, slow. He didn't see me, just kept talking. Yeah, the guy showed up early, freaked out. I thought he was going to go full Rambo. Pause, nah, Karen handled it. Said he checked out of the neighbourhood long before he ever left. I froze. That was personal. That was calculated. He turned, saw me. I didn't blink, you stalking us now, he said, suddenly nervous. I walked up close enough to see the sweat start forming at his collar. You tell Karen, I said evenly, that if she's going to quote me, she should try saying it to my face. He opened his mouth, but I was already walking away later that day. We took a drive by the house. My son wanted to see his room. We didn't go inside. We didn't even stop the car. But when we slowed, he pressed his face to the window. His room had been painted. The posters were gone. There was a little dog bed where his telescope used to be. Is it still our house? He asked quietly. I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to say yes, but I couldn't lie instead. I said nothing that night in the motel. My wife found me staring at the laptop again. You okay? She asked. I shook my head. I've had insurgents lie to my face, I said. I've had generals look me in the eye and feed me false intel. But I never thought it'd be a clipboard in a neighbourhood newsletter that got me. She sat next to me. What do? We build the file. I said we track every vote, every signature, every dollar, and then I stared at the screen. We take back what's ours. The next morning, I returned to the HOA office this time. I brought a GoPro, clipped it to my shirt, walked in like I was there to buy a condo. Karen was inside chatting with a realtor. I didn't say a word, just walked to the community bulletin board there. It was a printed copy of Bylaw 14C, dated, signed, stamped. I snapped a photo. Then I leaned close and whispered, "You should be careful who you write laws for." Karen's smile twitched. She opened her mouth, but before she could respond, someone else entered the office. Mrs. Delaney, the widow from the corner lot. She saw me paused, then walked up to Karen and said, "You did get his deployment notice, didn't you?" Karen's smile vanished. "You told me you had it on file," Mrs. Delaney added, voice louder now. "I remember I asked you about it. You said he's not coming back soon enough to matter the silence was volcanic." Karen didn't reply. I turned and walked out. She didn't know it yet, but that one sentence just turned a civil war into a court case. There's a different kind of silence in a motel room, not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums, the kind that thickens around you like the air itself is judging you. My son slept under a pile of blankets like he was trying to hide from the world. My wife stared at the ceiling like it owed her answers. And me? I sat in the motel chair in uniform pants, a t-shirt that still smelled like aircraft fuel, one boot, on one off laptop open pages pulled up, and in the corner of the screen like a parasite. The HOA charter? I don't remember opening it, but there, it was still mocking me. Still legal, a notice had popped up earlier. Cease and desist issued unauthorized surveillance because I wore a camera into their office. They were trying to bait me, push me. I took the bait, I grabbed my keys and stood. "Where are you going?" My wife asked out where the war is. I parked across from the house, engine off. It was dark enough that I could blend into the shadow of the neighbour's car from this angle. I could see our living room light was on. I watched 15 minutes passed, then 20. A man walked into view. Probably Ron, the new tenant. He was carrying one of our old bookshelves, something I built years ago. Real wood, blood and sweat kind of build. He dumped it on the curb, just tossed it. I froze, then got out of the car. Walked across the street with the kind of stillness you only learn in combat zones. "Hey," I called. He turned, and for a second I saw fear in his eyes, like maybe I wasn't a guy. Maybe I was the ghost of someone he didn't want to think about. Hi," he said, holding up his hands. "You're Look, I don't want trouble, man." Karen said you were. Karen said what? That you vacated, that you left the HOA hanging, that the house was, what's the word? She used reclaimed for occupancy. I pointed at the shelf. That yours. He glanced back. It's a little busted, so that belonged to my son. He paused. Guilt flickered. Hey, I'm sorry I didn't before I realised it. I'd crossed the line, I got close inches. You don't throw away someone else's life just because it looks broken to you, I said, voice low, that shelf held up when nothing else. Did you think you're making room? You're erasing us. He nodded. Backed up. I'm sorry, then get inside. He did, and I stood there in the yard that used to be mine. My heart pounded, not from anger, from restraint, because there was a time, a younger version of me, who wouldn't have stopped at a warning. That version of me, he came out once in Kandahar. Convoy, got hit, civilian interference. Young soldier with me, panicked, froze up. I made a call, went around protocol, pulled the trigger. When someone else hesitated, saved 5 lives and carried that man's blood in my memories. Ever since my CO said it was the right call, but it didn't feel right, because even right calls hurt. And that moment, that was the last time I acted without a plan. Until now, back at the motel, my wife was sitting at the tiny table. She looked at me, really looked, "You okay?" She asked, "No, I'm not. You going to tell me what happened?" I sat down, took off my boots, rubbed the back of my neck. they threw out his bookshelf. She didn't speak, they tossed it like garbage. She nodded slowly and then said, "So what's the plan?" I looked at her, and for the first time in days, maybe weeks, I gave her the real answer. "I'm calling in the team." She didn't flinch. Instead, she poured us both coffee. "They'll need rooms," she said, "and space to stage." "I'll handle it." She smiled, and I realised something. She wasn't scared, she was ready. The next morning, I hit the thread muster at 1800, staging at the far lot behind Shell Station. One reply, then another. A dozen. Even the guys who hadn't spoken in years replied with the same word copy. This wasn't a reunion, it was an operation. And by sundown, we were taking the first house back. I always thought reunions were supposed to feel warm. This one didn't. This one felt like the last calm breath before a detonation. They started arriving around 0400 hours. Silent. No high fives, no cheers, just handshakes, nods and eyes. That had seemed too much, and they all brought one thing. Purpose Ramos was first still huge, still terrifying, still talking like a drill instructor crossed with a linebacker. "Where's the problem?" he asked. "You're standing on it." We met at the Shell Station lot, too public for real planning, just enough for staging from there. We moved into the real war room, a shuttered vape shop across from the neighbourhood. I'd cleared it in advance, rented it under an LLC. Yates unrolled the sat map. Bowen set up routers. Davis still calm, as Death unloaded a duffel bag that made TSA agents cry in their sleep. "You brought the noise." I asked him always, he said, but this wasn't joy, this was justice. I dropped the map marker onto the printed neighbourhood grid. "This is Alpha," I said. "Primary objective house, secondary HOA office across the block, but I want that untouched, unless absolutely necessary." "You think she's hiding something there?" Ramos asked. "Probably, but our priority is visibility proof, presence control, the narrative." Yates scanned the layout she got. Cams, front porch, back fence, cloud, storage. "I can reroute," Bowen said, "but you'll lose real-time feedback." "I don't need real-time. I need her off balance." I heard the door creak behind us, turned, and there stood Reed. He hadn't spoken to me in years, not after the tribunal. He walked in, sat down. "A go bag," and stared me down before we start. He said, "You need to answer one question. Ask this isn't just revenge, right? No." "You sure?" I didn't blink. "It's a homecoming." He studied me, then nodded once. That's all I needed. We prepped loadouts, civilian dress, no plates, no insignia, no weapons, not real ones. We weren't here to fight, we were here to reclaim. But something kept nagging at me. That voice from 3, the memory Kandahar. The man I couldn't save. I felt the pressure behind my eyes. Bowen noticed, pulled me aside. "You good?" "No, you need to be. We're walking the line one wrong step, and it's federal. I know I'm not worried about her." He said, "I'm worried about you." Halfway through the layout brief, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number. No name," I answered. Silence. "Then you're trespassing." "Karen, you're bluffing," I said. "Am I? Because I just filed an injunction with Judge Halverson. You know, the 1-year-old neighbour, his daughter sits on the HOA board." "Now you're scared?" "No," she said coolly. "I'm connected and I'm patient. Go ahead. Bring your little army buddies. I'll be waiting with paperwork." The line went dead. I turned to the team. "She knows." Ramos stepped up. "Then we do this cleaner, smarter. We've got less than 48 hours. I said, "She's trying to legally flip the house transfer title under fake abandonment clauses." Yates grunted. "She bribed the clerk." "No, she married his cousin." Silence. Then Davis from the corner. "So what's the move?" I walked to the corner of the room, pulled out something. I hadn't shown them a box wrapped in the old flag we kept after deployment inside my folded uniform. I held it up. She disrespected this. I didn't say me. I didn't say us. I said this because that's what got us here. Not pettiness, not revenge, but the line she crossed. Reed stepped forward. laid his hand on the uniform and said, "What we were all thinking." Then, let's take it back with honour. We broke the team into pairs, Davis and Ramos decoy, and containment Bowen and Yates. Digital infiltration Reed and I point entry and narrative control. We'd show up like neighbours, friendly, smiling with hidden cams, mics recorded handoffs, every step legal but every word a blade. Before we broke, I looked each of them in the eye. Karen thinks this is a game. She thinks you're here to scare her. She's wrong. You're here to remind her. Some people still protect what's theirs. They nodded, silent, furious, focused, but at 0600 sharp. It wasn't Karen who opened the door. It was a sheriff, and he had our names on a list. 0600 hours operation. Homecoming, that was a go. We moved in civilian pairs. No tactical gear, just backpacks and cameras, everything. Legal, everything documented. I'd never seen the team look more dangerous, not because of what we carried, but because of what we left behind. No weapons. Just truth. But truth isn't bulletproof. We were halfway down the block when the first squad car appeared. No lights, no sirens. It pulled up slow, intentional, like a hunter circling prey that doesn't know it's already caught. Then came the second car, different model, no markings. But when Ramos squinted at the tyres, he muttered, "County Sheriff's Office. Look at the wear pattern." I nodded positions. I said the team split, not to retreat, but to witness. Every man pulled out a camera and waited. The doors opened and out stepped. Sheriff Blaine sunglasses, clipboard, neutral expression, almost too calm behind him. Deputy Nunez, a rookie hand, twitching near his belt trigger. Happy or nervous? Probably both, gentlemen, Blaine said, walking toward me like a man arriving to inspect pest control. You want to tell me why 6 military-age males are coordinating outside a residential home at dawn? I raised both hands casually. No weapons, no threats, we're reclaiming property legally. Karen's SUV pulled up behind them. Right on cue, she got out like she was stepping onto a stage. Neutral colours, manicured hands holding a thermos like a champagne flute. You're trespassing, she said. This is harassment. I ignored her, addressed Blaine directly. You've seen the deed. I've seen what she filed, he said. Emergency property control transfer based on HOA abandonment clause, which is fake. That's not my call. He nodded toward his deputy, and that's when Nunez reached for his cuffs, and that's when Davis stepped in. Fast, calm, just enough, sir. Any physical contact without a formal arrest will be interpreted as excessive force. We're recording under state civil code. Nunez froze. Blaine paused, back off. Deputy Nunez did, but barely. Karen smiled wider. You see, you're not in uniform now. You're just angry. Men trespassing. I didn't respond instead. I walked toward her close enough to smell her perfume. Then I whispered, You really filed an abandonment clause. After forging the timestamp on my deployment papers, she flinched just for a second, then smiled again. Prove it. I stepped back, tapped my earpiece. Bowen now across the street. Bowen sent the signal. We weren't just filming. We were streaming to a private YouTube link public enough to count private enough to kill at will footage from Karen's HO. Yeah, meeting her. Voice on tape saying he's not coming back. And if he does, we'll make it, so it's not his home anymore. Sheriff Blaine's jaw twitched. I handed him the flash drive. There's more property records, tampered meeting minutes. Check the IP address, edits on the charter. They all route to her house. Blaine didn't speak. Karen did slander. You're all just thugs with internet access, but I saw it. Her hand, it was shaking. Then my phone buzzed unknown number again. I answered, and a voice female clipped calm said, You're about to be served. What federal injunction, IRS tax fraud investigation tied to illegal rental income declared under falsified HOA filings? I blinked. Who are you? She didn't say, she just ended the call. I looked up. Karen was dialing her phone, smiling like she just landed her final blow. I stepped away from the group, heart pounding. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about who was backing her old judges, dirty clerks, and now possibly federal allies. Ramos approached you all right? No, I said. I've seen that look before. He said, Afghanistan market blast. We lost comms, civilians screaming. You still got us out. I met his eyes. You're not out of this. He grinned. Didn't say, I wanted out, just said, I've seen that look, means we're winning. They're scared later that night back at the motel. I couldn't sleep, so I reviewed the footage again, and there in the background of one HOA meeting clip, I spotted it, a familiar man in a suit talking to Karen laughing. He was my former CEO and retired, but there's no mistaking that face. And that's when I realised Karen's not the final boss, she's just a distraction. The real enemy isn't sitting on a clipboard, it's sitting in an office. And the reason Karen was so confident is because she's not alone, which means neither am I. Tomorrow we go for the throat. Redford's face on that HOA meeting recording did something to me. It wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation. This wasn't some nosy suburban dictator acting alone. This was a rigged system, old favours, legal handshakes, and untraceable email chains, and I'd walked right into it. I watched the clip on loop, Redford smiling beside Karen like she was his newest project, leaning in close, whispering something just off mic, probably about which properties to reclassify next. The same guy who used to lecture us on honour and ethics now looked like a politician holding court over a bake sale coup. And he'd signed off on the one clause, I'd missed abandonment of property due to deployment. A clause that didn't exist until after I deployed, written in legalese that Ryer of Redford's phrasing Yates confirmed it. A forensic timestamp on the HOA charter showed the edit happened 3 weeks after my deployment date, post-dated and backfilled to look legitimate. We're not just fighting her? I said that night at the motel. My wife, sitting cross-legged with a yellow legal pad in her lap, didn't look up. We're fighting him too. Redford, she said, I figured you always did see the cracks first. I see leverage, she said. Karen thinks she's covered, but Redford, he's sloppy, he's arrogant, that's a crack. We can wedge open. We called Bowen. He scrubbed HOA digital files from the past 18 months, traced every edit, and in one audit log buried deep a username. Redford Compliance Admin. He wasn't hiding it because he didn't think anyone would look at 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I paced the parking lot with a notepad. Each page had a name. Each name, a position. Each position, a weak spot zoning board, director up for re-election. HOA Treasurer filed bankruptcy last year, Sheriff Blaine under internal review for a use of force incident. They weren't bulletproof, just underexposed, and I knew how to expose them the next day. The team went dark, phones off, radio silent except Bowen. He stayed at the motel working on something we called the kill packet. It had everything AP trace logs from HOA, charter edits, IRS filings showing undeclared rental income under Karen's LLC security footage of Karen falsifying meeting times, a list of tenants affected by her property schemes. Redford's digital signature on compliance documents. Despite not holding an official title, I uploaded the packet to a secure cloud, sent links to the local district court, a military JAGI contact. I still trusted the State Housing Commission. Each email ended with the same line, a house was stolen while a soldier served his country. How many others? But the move that made them sweat, we sent a physical copy of the kill packet to Karen's house. Certified mail signature required. That night, we watched her get it. Her expression when she opened the envelope, like someone handed her a grenade, with the pin halfway out, she ran back inside without even closing her door. The retaliation came quick. Ramos was pulled over the next day once for a suspicious vehicle. Second time, he got served, restraining order filed by Karen claimed he'd threatened her verbally. We had footage. He hadn't even spoken to her. Didn't matter. Now he had to stay 500 feet from the subdivision. Just as our operation neared the climax, I'll sit out. Ramos said, This is bigger than me. You're part of this. I told him we adapt, but inside, I was boiling. Karen was bleeding our team from the edges, playing legal landmines. Death by paperwork. My wife called it out first. She's trying to isolate you. I nodded. Divide the team, build doubt, shake our focus. She doesn't know you. I looked at her. She doesn't know us. She corrected. We filed a countersuit, documented every second of harassment, weaponized, legal tactics, surveillance, civil liberty violations. But we didn't submit it. Yet, we waited because Karen was about to hand us the final nail 2 days later. We got a tip, anonymous number. Female voice check, the City Planning Board agenda. Page 3, we did there. It was proposal for property acquisition zoning shift, initiated by Karen's LLC. Marked urgent, designed to convert abandoned properties into short-term rental zones. My home highlighted in red, with a line item attached, sold pending approval to a holding company tied to Redford that night. The tide shifted. We weren't fighting a crooked HOA anymore. We were fighting organised fraud, and now the feds were involved. The house wasn't the prize, it was the bait, and we just found the trapdoor under all of it. Next move, we go public with everything. It started with a siren, just one slow, no urgency, but it hit me like a flashbang to the spine. Not because I was scared, because I knew what was coming. Karen was playing her final card. I stepped out onto my lawn like I was walking into a courtroom. Not a word, not a blink, just a full stare down, with the 2 cruisers rolling in high beams cutting across my driveway like searchlights. One officer stepped out. The other stayed in the car, scanning. Karen was already across the street, flanked by her sister, and some HOA toad holding a clipboard of his own, like he was auditioning for assistant villain, sir, the cop said, resting his hand on his vest. We received a report of property trespass and possible threats against residents. I didn't blink. Was the complaint from a woman named Karen by any chance? He hesitated, didn't answer, just glanced back toward the car. The script had already been written. He was here to follow it. I held up my folder. Deed footage. Active complaint filed with Housing Authority. You really want to open this box, sir? No, don't sir me. You're here because a known HOA tyrant is weaponizing your department. You want me to back down. You'll need backup. The silence spread. Ramos stepped out from the side yard, arms folded. Davis leaned against the truck, chewing sunflower seeds. Like this was a ball game. Karen started shouting. He threatened me. He's scaring the renters. He brought military weapons into a suburban neighbourhood. The officer's lip twitched. Not a smile, just disbelief. You got proof of any of that, Mum? She pulled out her phone. Right here, I have emails he took. The phone scanned the screen, frowned. You emailed yourself a screenshot of a Google Street View photo from 2021. It shows his truck, ma'am. The second cop said, finally stepping out. That's not how evidence works. Karen turned red, then white, then feral. You're all in on it, she screamed. This is coordinated harassment. It's a coup. You're enabling stolen valor. The neighbours were gathering now, some with coffee, some filming. Mr. Jacobs next door had brought a lawn chair. This is better than Netflix, he whispered to his wife. Mrs. Delaney had a front row seat, gripping her cane like it was a gavel. The officer returned. My packet didn't say anything, just nodded, then turned to Karen. Mum, I'm going to need you to step back and stop yelling. If you continue escalating, we'll have to ask you to leave the scene. Escalating? She shrieked. They're the ones trespassing. This man has documentation, he said calmly. That's a civil issue. If you want to pursue that in court, that's your right. You're useless, she snapped. The officer's jaw twitched. Then something cracked. Karen stomped across the street and into my yard. Ramos moved forward. Don't I warned? Let her cook. Karen got within 10 feet of me. Finger raised. You think you've won? I own this neighbourhood. I built this place. Your little platoon tricks won't work here. You're trespassing now. I said on camera. She froze. Bowen waved at her from the porch smile. He called, "You're trending." She stormed off that night. She came back 3:14 a.m. Bowen's system picked up the motion Karen in slippers with Redford. He had gloves, a crowbar. Karen had a flash drive. They tried to bypass the lock trigger alarm. We watched from the motel livestream. She went straight for my son's room, ripped open drawers, rummaged through our keepsakes, looking for the evidence. The kill packet. She was scared because she knew she was exposed. Police arrived mid-ransack. Karen bolted for the back door, didn't make it. Redford froze when they cuffed her. She wailed, "I was checking on the tenants. I had concerns." "You had no legal right to enter." The officer said, "I'm the HOA president. You're not law enforcement." Ramos watched from the shadows. Slippers, he whispered, perfect. Karen was escorted into the cruiser. Mascara, smudged hair, frizzed, screaming like a cornered raccoon. Redford didn't say a word, just stared at the lawn. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The neighbours watched from their windows. Phones recorded Delaney. She raised her cane. You should have stopped at the letter, Karen, for a moment. It was quiet. I stood in the middle of the yard, floodlights overhead, adrenaline shaking my bones. Not triumph, just release. I turned to Ramos. "We're not done." He nodded because what we found next was bigger. Much bigger. The renters came forward, but not just with a thank you, with receipts. Karen's house was just one of dozens, and what they told us changed everything. The day after Karen was arrested, I was expecting quiet. I was wrong instead of a breather. I got a knock, not from cops, not from press. 2 people stood on my porch, young, early 30s. Maybe she wore a blue hospital scrubs. He had grease under his fingernails and guilt carved into his brow. "We're the renters," she said. And just like that, the oxygen left the room. I didn't move, didn't invite them in. "You've got a lot of nerve." She nodded. "I know, and we're not here to fight the guy." Shifted awkwardly. "We didn't know about you, about any of it." I crossed my arms. "You thought this house was just available?" "They said it was foreclosed." The woman said. Her voice shaking slightly, said the owner had abandoned the property while overseas, that it was under HOA control. The word hit me like a gut punch. Abandoned. She flinched. "I'm Amanda, this is Leo," she said. "We came to say sorry, but also to show you something." Ramos stepped closer from inside. He didn't like them being here, didn't trust it. I didn't either. But Amanda pulled out a tablet. "Please just watch." She showed me an email thread. HOA headers. Karen's signature subject line. Authorised rental unit fast track approval. This is what we got when we signed. Leo said, Karen told us it was being managed directly by the board, said it was part of a housing relief pilot revitalising distressed homes. I stared at the screen. The paper trail looked polished too. Polished? She charged us above market rate, Amanda said quietly. Said the extra went to legal recovery fees. She'd tell you who owned it. I asked. Leo shook his head. Didn't care. She said he wouldn't be coming back. My fist curled back inside. I pulled out my own folder. Mortgage receipts, deployment papers, active service records. Everything that said this home was mine and had always been mine. I tossed them onto the table. This, I said, is the truth. Amanda stared at the documents like they were crime scene photos because they were. We were pawns, she said softly. I didn't know how deep it went until yesterday, until I saw the cops cuff her, until I saw you. Ramos leaned forward and there's more. Amanda opened a second folder. This one held printed pages, some wrinkled, some annotated rental agreements, scan checks, fake court notices. I found others, she said, at least 6 more homes, all managed by the HOA, all rented out and all owned by deployed military. My breath stopped. Say that again. All deployed, all military, all overseas, or in rehab. She used the same justification violation of Code 19B. Abandonment of community property during absence. Code 19B. a clause meant for burned-out sheds or homes left in disrepair for years. Karen weaponized it against active soldiers. We started digging. Bowen pulled public records, property lists, signatures, bylaws. And then there it was. One name printed at the bottom of every transfer: Edgar L. Monroe, HOA treasurer, former real estate broker. He hadn't been at a single board meeting I'd attended years ago, but he'd signed off on every illegal lease we'd found, all traced back to his investment firm. That wasn't just shady, that was criminal enterprise Monroe's. Not just complicit, Bowen said. He's the source, Karen's just the hammer. I paced the kitchen, heart pounding. How many homes? 9 that we know of. How many soldiers? 3 still deployed. 2 in VA hospitals. 1 died in combat last year. His property got reclaimed 2 months later. Silence. Amanda spoke softly. She told us his family had walked away from it. I felt something inside me tear. I wasn't just fighting to get my home back anymore. This was theft on a battlefield. Most civilians don't even know exists. And Karen, she was just the face. Monroe was the architect. I want him exposed, I said. Ramos cracked his knuckles. How hard? No weapons, no threats. Just truth louder than a bullet, Bowen added. We crafted a war plan. Davis ran surveillance on Monroe's office. Nothing unusual, just a dusty old man with too many locks on his gate. But Bowen struck gold, an anonymous HOA server. Back up every document, every email, every fake violation notice, right there. Digital footprints straight to Monroe's laptop. I called my contact in the DA's office, not for favours, just to tell her, "You're going to want to see this." She said nothing, but she didn't hang up that night. We posted a video footage from Karen's arrest, redacted documents, testimony from Amanda and 2 other families. We called it the neighbourhood takeover. How the HOA hijacked the homes of heroes in less than 24 hours. It hit 1 million views. The next morning, Monroe locked down his home. No lights, no movement, but the subpoenas didn't knock. They landed directly, and the cops came with them. Ramos Davis, and I watched from the truck. He opened the door, didn't even ask who it was, just stared like he'd been waiting for the war to reach his front lawn. "You've been stealing homes," I said flatly. "You abandoned them," he replied. I stepped closer. "We defended them. You looted them." He smiled. "You'll never win. Hoes are legal fortresses." I leaned in. Then, "I guess it's time for siege tactics." The officers stepped forward, took him in. No fight, no denial. Just a muttered line. "You can't fix stupid patriotism." Ramos almost swung. I stopped him. "He's not worth it." We drove home. It was almost over, but not quiet, because when I got home, there was a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just a SEAL City Enforcement Division complaint inside unauthorized tactical training on residential grounds filed 2 days ago. And signed Karen Prescott from jail. Karen wasn't done. She'd filed one last strike before going down. And if this report went through, my house would be condemned, unless I did something drastic. I thought we'd won. That's the dangerous part about a clean victory. Just when you start breathing again, you forget to keep your guard up. And then the letter came. No postmark, no name, just a white envelope on my doorstep, like a bad omen inside. A single page, city complaint filed under my name, against my house violations listed in bold, unauthorized tactical training, community safety risk civil code violation 43A, all tied to my backyard. I stared at the form, not printed, typed, clean, precise. A document meant to look official, but then I caught the signature at the bottom. Karen L. Prescott filed the day she got arrested. She timed it like a demolition charge, pulled the pin, smiled for the mugshot, and let the fallout hit me on delay. My throat went dry. Ramos walked in behind me, paused. "What's that?" I handed it to him. His eyebrows twitched. "She's still playing." "No," I said, heart pounding. "She's finishing." Suddenly, every worst-case scenario came rushing in at once. If the city flagged the complaint, my house would be marked for inspection. If the inspection failed, it could be condemned if the condemnation held. I'd lose the right to reside on the property pending court review, which meant eviction again. And if the army saw that it wouldn't just be a PR nightmare, it'd be a security liability worst case. I'd get slapped with an internal disciplinary review labelled a community risk, maybe even dishonourably discharged for bringing discredit upon the service, all from one lie written from a jail cell. And this time, it wasn't about winning anymore. This was existence. I sat down, the weight hit different. I'd fought so long I forgot what fear felt like. Real fear, the kind that makes your stomach cramp and your fingers itch like you're supposed to be doing something. But while Karen was in jail, Monroe was indicted. The HOA had collapsed. So how was she still swinging? Then I realised this wasn't just her. She had help. Bowen pulled records like a machine-scoured submission timestamps IP logs. And there it was. The complaint had been uploaded not through the city's public web portal, but through a secure legal channel, one that required firm verification. A small firm based out of a strip mall, 2 counties over. Guess who owned the building? Monroe's nephew, and just like that, the final piece clicked. Karen wasn't making a last stand. She was part of a fallback plan. The rats were still moving inside the walls. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I did what soldiers do when the first wave fails and the enemy repositions. I regrouped, and I planned a counter-offensive first. I built a file evidence of tampering video from the backyard. Every training session was either rescue drills with Max or controlled mobility work cleared through veteran charities. Noise logs, security footage, signed neighbour waivers. I even dug up an old HOA community newsletter from 2 years ago, where Karen herself praised my service dog program and community outreach efforts for veterans, her words in ink on record. Now being used to frame me second. I called in a favour. A friend from JA, former prosecutor, clean record, quiet, demeanour shark, for blood under the surface. I need this buried, I said. You mean handled? No. I replied. Buried legally, so deep. Even Karen's ghost can't find it. He paused, then asked for my address. The inspection came 2 days later. Middle-aged guy looked like someone's uncle who moonlighted as a referee. Just need to take a look around, he said. Of course, I said calm, as I could manage Ramos Bowen, and I walked him through the backyard. The setup was minimal sandbox area, locked storage noise dampeners on all gates. Max performed a command test, obedient, precise. Never left the handler's side. The inspector jotted notes. You run this like a training facility? He said, we are a training facility. I replied. He raised an eyebrow for what for, coming home and not breaking. I said simply. He nodded. Once, didn't say another word, 3 hours later. We got the ruling complaint dismissed. City found the submission incomplete, unverified and retaliatory in nature. They flagged Karen's name, launched a fraud inquiry. I sat back in my chair, finally letting the air out of my lungs, and then the email came in subject, HOA, Asset Redistribution Review, inside a forwarded request from the County Housing Board Karen had used. HOA funds meant for legal upkeep and neighbourhood maintenance to pay her legal team, and now the board wanted it back from her personally. That's what finally broke her. Not the arrest, not the exposure, not even the humiliation. It was the debt you take, someone's illusion of power. They'll scream. You take their money, they'll fold. A week later, her lawyer filed a motion to withdraw. Karen stood in court alone, hair, unwashed skin, pale. I didn't go. I didn't need to because some enemies aren't worth watching fall. Some battles you win by walking away and letting the world finish them for you. I came home that evening and stood in my driveway. The porch light clicked on. Max barked once and patted toward the gate. Ramos handed me a beer and said, So now what? I smiled now. Now we make this place a home again. And I meant it until I opened the mailbox inside another envelope. Smaller, heavier. One word written across the top in block letters, appeal inside, a handwritten note. No punctuation, no return address, just a sentence you didn't win. You just got lucky, and taped to the back of the page, a key not mine, old rusty and labelled in faded Sharpie Unit 13, which didn't exist. Not in this subdivision, not on any HOA record, not in any blueprint we'd ever seen. What the hell was Karen trying to tell me? Was it a threat, a bluff, or something worse? Another move on a board? I thought we'd already burned to ash, because if that key opened what I thought it did, this war wasn't over. It hadn't even started yet. I didn't sleep the night I found the key, didn't talk about it either. Not to Ramos, not to Bowen, not even to Max, because I knew what it meant. Karen wasn't done. She was baiting me. One last mind game. One final riddle. So I played along. Unit 13 didn't exist on any current map, but buried in a 14-year-old blueprint from the county archive. There, it was a storm shelter, cement-lined, hidden beneath the foundation of a raised model home, sealed, abandoned and forgotten, except by Karen. She used to sit on the HOA board. She signed the closure order herself. Now she wanted me to open it, so I did Ramos, and I went in clean. Just gloves, bolt cutters, and a crowbar. The hatch gave a metallic groan. The air inside smelled like copper, and gilt inside were 4 crates. A rusted desk and a single shoebox labelled board assets. Do not destroy inside everything. Financial ledgers forged, voting tallies, surveillance logs, HOA funds rerouted to personal accounts, photos of every illegal renter they stuffed into my house, and dozens of email printouts from Karen, bragging one dated 2 weeks before I returned home. Read, "I don't care if he's active duty, he left, that makes him fair game." I boxed it all, drove to the state attorney's office, walked straight past reception, and laid it on the counter. Tell them it's time the arrest came. 48 hours later, Karen was on house release ankle monitor, still parading around like she'd beaten the system. When they cuffed her again, she tried to smile even when the news vans rolled up, even when they read the new charges, but that smile faded when she saw me standing across the street. I didn't wave, didn't flinch. She locked eyes with me, and, for the first time, I saw it doubt. Then, something worse. Fear court took a week. Her lawyer withdrew. She tried to represent herself. Bad move. The state shredded her line by line. HOA funds, false liens, racial profiling and fines targeting service families with forged complaints. They found 4 more cases like mine. She didn't just steal my house. She built an empire on screwing over people who couldn't fight back. But this time, she picked the wrong soldier. Sentencing was swift guilty. All counts 8 years minimum civil restitution. Pending. They seized her car, her account and her condo publicly. And the HOA disbanded assets, redistributed. Every homeowner in the community got a payout, including me. A month later, I sat on the porch. The grass was wild again. The porch light buzzed. Max lay sprawled under the steps, snoring Ramos had gone back to school. Bowen took a contracting job overseas. The house was quiet for the first time in years. I was quiet. No scans. No drills. Just breathe. Then the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Delaney, the neighbour who'd stood up for Josh. All those weeks ago, she brought cookies and a folded envelope. Found this in my mailbox. Think it's yours? Inside a cheque from the state fund, and a handwritten note. Thank you for showing us. We don't have to be afraid of them anymore. I closed my eyes. That's when it finally hit me. We didn't just win. We changed the rules. Max stirred, tail wagging. I scratched behind his ears and whispered, "We're good now, buddy. Because for once we were there are 1,000 ways to serve your country. Some do it with boots on the ground. Others, they fight from their porch against a clipboard, a smirk and the kind of evil that hides behind bylaws. But in the end, justice is louder than any HOA notice.